Good afternoon. Welcome to this online event about applying for Nuffield Foundation funding for Black researchers. I'm Alex Beer, Assistant Director of Strategy at the Nuffield Foundation. I've managed many of our grants on poverty, inequality, labour market and welfare, and I've led our work on understanding communities. I'm responsible for our strategic fund funding and for our amazing grants operations team who manage our grant applications and management processes.
And I'm Liz Gilfillan. I'm a social researcher with a background in race equality work. And here at the Foundation, I'm programme head for the relatively new Racial Diversity UK programme, which launched in 2024.
Right, and I'm just going to get the slides up. And our plan for today is to talk you through what the Nuffield Foundation is and does, the big questions that we are addressing, what our grant programmes are and how to apply for these. This webinar is a first for us in targeting a particular group of researchers, Black researchers, who are underrepresented among our applicants and award holders. Our aim today is to make sure that you have access to all the information we publish to help you decide if we are the right funder for your research, whether you can apply to us for research funding, and if you decide to apply to us, what we look for in a good application. We'll be presenting information for about 35 to 40 minutes and then opening up for a live Q&A session. We will let you know when you can start to post your questions in the Q&A box, so please do get those questions ready. We will cover a lot of information in a short space of time, so please be reassured that we'll share the presentation slides and the Q&As with you after the webinar. And this webinar recording will be posted online so you can watch it back. And we'll be telling you about other ways that you can keep in touch with us. Finally, for anyone who wants to activate live captions, we've put information in the chat about how to do that. And so, without further ado, we'll move on. In July 2025, the Nuffield Foundation published a new strategic review. We remain committed to our founding values, but we've refreshed key aspects that we're going to share here with you today. The Foundation's purpose remains, as always, to advance social well-being. We seek to achieve this by funding and undertaking rigorous research, encouraging innovation, and supporting the use of sound evidence to improve people's lives. We tackle pressing, complex questions to meet the complexity of today's challenges, aiming to open up opportunities and to improve the lives of individuals, families, and communities. Our values set out the organisation that we want to be. We're financially and politically independent, which gives us the freedom to be open and objective. We convene and connect individuals and organisations to maximise impact. And we aim to be an open, collaborative and engaged funder, working with our grant holders to help maximise the impact of their projects. Rigour points to the high standards that we're aiming for in all that we do, achieving quality that gives us influence and impact. With curiosity, we're fostering exploration, encouraging our staff and those we fund and work with to pursue new ideas and challenge old assumptions. And inclusivity is about our goal to ensure that everyone feels valued, respected, and empowered. Over the next 5 years, 5 pressing questions and the connections between them will guide our funding decisions and the work that we undertake. Some build on Nuffield's existing strengths, while others take us into newer terrain. Leaning into our existing strengths is a question about how we can build a prosperous and fair society. It's about understanding the interaction between economic performance and social challenges. Because despite its underlying strengths, the UK is undergoing a period of historic stagnation. It has undermined living standards, entrenched inequalities, and exacerbated many of the nation's most urgent social challenges. A fairer society and a stronger economy should go hand in hand. We want to fund research and collaborate with partners to gain a deeper understanding of the interactions between economic performance and social problems and how changes in one can drive progress in the other. We want to identify routes to economic growth and reductions in poverty, insecurity and inactivity through economic levers, for example, increasing investment, productivity and employment, and through social investment approaches, such as education, training, income insurance, and support for those with health conditions. Our second question on an inclusive society is examining how changing demography is reshaping the UK and what is needed to support belonging and opportunity. The UK is becoming more diverse in race, religion, and family structures, while the population is aging and fertility rates are low. These demographic changes are playing out differently across places and communities, shaping people's experiences, well-being, and relationships in complex ways. We want to work with researchers and other partners to help the UK respond to these shifts in ways that promote inclusion, opportunity, and belonging. We aim to explore the drivers of demographic change and the implications for state and society, including themes such as adapting to an ageing society, such as providing more care and support to work longer and improve intergenerational fairness. What an inclusive society looks like, and how intersecting factors like race, ethnicity, gender, disability, and social class shape identities and outcomes. And what helps communities to thrive, including factors affecting social cohesion, housing markets, and the local environment, and how place shapes opportunities, identities, and sense of belonging. On science, technology, and society, our interests are in developing the evidence-based governance models and policy insights needed to deliver equitable outcomes. As new technologies are rapidly developed and deployed, policymakers, businesses, and individuals are grappling with their potential uses, limitations, benefits, and harms. Building on the expertise of the Nuffield Council on Bioethics and the Ada Lovelace Institute, research centres that we founded and co-fund, we will work with researchers and a wide range of other partners to ensure that advances in science and technology are aligned with the public interest. To do this, we're interested in research that develops effective and agile models of governance capable of securing public trust and maximising societal benefits, builds evidence on whether key technologies work, how they are being used in practice and with what human impact, and investigates the relational and social dimensions of science, technology, and social change. Also, examining the choices facing policymakers and practitioners in sectors such as education, health, justice, welfare, and social care, including how to mitigate emerging inequalities. On climate change, we are interested in understanding the societal implications of climate change and environmental policies and how they affect different groups. With the world significantly off track to limit global warming to 1.5%, the UK must act fast to meet its commitment to achieve net zero by 2025. Any action taken to alleviate or adjust to the impact of climate change should also work to deliver equitable outcomes and economic growth. Climate policies are a relatively new focus for us, and we're keen to work with everyone to understand their implications on people's lives. Our interest is different from other funders. Our interest is in the distributional consequences of climate strategies in the UK. This includes the implications of net zero for different groups in society, as key areas such as housing, energy, and transport are decarbonised. The risks and opportunities that climate change poses for the economy, labour market, and public services, and the impact of local and regional environmental issues, including air and water quality, and how these affect different groups and communities. And last, but by no means least, we are examining what makes an effective institution and how legitimacy in those institutions can be nurtured. Public trust in key governing authorities in the UK is severely strained, compounded by misinformation, polarised public discourse, and reduced state capacity. We will work with researchers and other partners to explore ways of fostering effective institutions that can anchor local communities, improve decision-making, and bolster trust in our systems of governance. We've got a history of funding research into institutions, as well as incubating and building new capability, and a long-standing interest in justice as a pillar of a fair society. We are looking to build on these foundations and renew our focus on what makes for an effective institution. We'll focus on building and sustaining public trust in institutions, exploring how systems can be improved, and where new institutional capacity might be needed. Across all of the areas I've just mentioned, we are continuing to develop our thinking and will update our guidance accordingly as we go along. But please be reassured and expect refinement rather than sort of dramatic shifts in our direction. And we'll work to answer these questions in 5 ways. Through awarding grants, and Liz is going to talk a little bit more about the process of applying for grants in a little bit. Funding innovative interventions. And so one great example here is the Nuffield Early Language Intervention, that after a good period of development was ultimately adopted and rolled out by government. An example of our own research is the work that we've done on education, AI and ethics, and also education, neuroscience, genetics and ethics, sort of working across the different strands of the foundation and its centres. Our own synthesis work includes previously the changing face of early childhood and currently grown up, how young people aged 14 to 24 are making the journey to adulthood. On creating new institutional capability, we sometimes support new or emerging institutions where we want to build stronger capacity to address a strategic issue. We were a founding donor of the Food Foundation, in full fact, and more recently we provided startup funding for the Centre for Education Systems. And on student programmes, we've long supported students to develop research skills. We co-funded the creation of Q-STEP centres in universities. The Nuffield Research Placements provided opportunities for Year 12 students from disadvantaged backgrounds, and we're currently considering what next in this space. Now, for those of you who've been aware of the Nuffield Foundation for a while, education and justice research remains a priority, and those systems cut across many of our priority questions. Our interest in education spans the full life course from early years, even including prenatal, through school to further education, higher education, and lifelong learning. We're interested in people's opportunities, journeys through education and life changes, and how these are affected by their characteristics and circumstances. We're interested in the policies that affect these journeys and how they can be improved or reformed, and in educational practice in early years settings, schools, colleges, universities and workplaces, as well as in the home and community. And most proposals on education tend to address one of these 4 themes listed on the slide: capabilities, the skills and capabilities that equip people to live and work in a fast-changing world; disadvantage and the impact that it has on children and young people's experiences, be that social and educational needs, socioeconomic disadvantage, differences in parenting and home environment, racism, and other forms of discrimination and structural inequalities, and also including experience of the care system. Young people's pathways is about the choices at key points in young people's education and training and the move into work. And improving the quality of teaching and learning includes issues to do with the educational workforce, pedagogical practice, qualification and assessment, attendance, admission and inclusion, and things like funding and regulation. On justice, we recognise that the justice system is vital for protecting rights, resolving disputes and securing redress, and is a pillar of a fair and prosperous society. We're interested in using evidence to support an accessible, fair and effective justice system. And our key focus is on the administrative, civil, family and youth justice systems. not criminal justice. The Public Right to Justice is our new programme examining how the justice system serves the public and how it can better meet people's legal needs. And we continue to work in partnership with the Nuffield Family Justice Observatory, founded and funded by the Foundation, which is building a bridge between research evidence and frontline practice. So that is a relatively speedy overview of our areas of interest and our priority questions. As I said, there's more detail available on our website in our guide for applicants. And now I'll hand you over to Liz, who'll talk you through the application process.
Okay, thank you, Alex. So over the next few slides, I'm going to talk through our funding programs, what they are, the application and assessment processes, what we look for in applications and some things to avoid in putting together an application. I'm going to do a bit more on, give a bit more information about what we mean by influence and impact, and then finish with some information about how to stay in touch with us and about the one-to-one sessions that we're offering as a follow-up to this webinar. I'd also mention that we're going to be using, when we get onto the question and answers slot, and we hope we'll have a good 20-30 minutes at the end of our presentations for that, we'll be using the Q&A function, so do drop your questions in there and have those questions ready to go. So, starting with our funding programs. So, on the slide, we've got the three programs that are currently live. There are occasionally other programs, but nothing, these are the live ones at the moment. And you should always check on our website or sign up for our newsletter so that you can keep up to date with what those funding programs are. Our main grants fund has 2 application rounds each year in spring and autumn. The spring application deadline this year will be the 13th of April. The main grants programme is by far our largest funding pot. We also then have our strategic fund, which is currently open with a deadline of the 16th of March. There'll almost certainly be future strategic grant funding rounds, but we haven't got set dates for those. So at the moment, we're looking at the current one with the deadline of the 16th of March. And then there's our Racial Diversity UK programme, where we only have 1 application round each year, and the next deadline for that will be in October. So how do you actually apply for any of these funds? The first thing you need to do is check that you meet our eligibility criteria, and we have an eligibility checker on the website. Just to remind you that all these slides with all the links will be circulated to everybody who signed up as soon as we've finished this live webinar. So the eligibility checker lets you check your eligibility. Basically, the basic thing is that you need to be a UK-based organisation. So you need to be employed by or affiliated to a UK-based organisation. We don't fund individuals. In terms of what we do fund, Alex has just been through all our our interests and our priority interests. That information is on our website. It's in our guide for applicants, which is on the website. And you need to always read our guide for applicants, and that expands a bit on the research priorities that Alex has outlined. You should also note that our research priorities, and this is all true for across all our programmes, particularly for RD UK, they will change from year to year, so you always need to look at the guidance before you apply. Another important thing to note is that we don't fund PhDs or master's degrees. If you're not sure, having read the guide for applicants, having looked at all the information on our website, if you're not sure if your research idea is going to be a good fit for any of our funding programmes, and you want to find out if your area of interest is one that we might be interested in, then you're very welcome to contact us. There's a dedicated applications@Nuffield Foundation email address. It'll be on the slides that we send to you. So if you send your query about your research area of interest, and also send a brief summary of what that area of interest is, we'd look for absolutely no more than a page. If you send that to the applications@Nuffield Foundation email address, then you will get a response, and we'll let you know whether your area of interest is a good fit with our priority interests. Whichever of the funding programs that you're applying to, the application and assessment processes are the same. So everything that comes next applies across those three programs that were on the previous slide. So it's a two-stage application process. Outline applications come in first, and they're assessed by our in-house subject matter experts. We shortlist, and then shortlisted outlines are invited to proceed to the full application stage, where we're asking for more detailed information and more information. Full applications that meet our quality threshold are then sent out for peer review. We collect reviews from external experts. We collate the peer reviews and then share those with the applicants and give applicants the opportunity to respond to those reviewer comments. And then all that information that's in the application, that's in the peer reviewers' comments, that's in the response to the peer reviewer comments, all gets collated to help make final decisions, which are made by our foundation's grants committee. The timing for that, it's a process that takes several months. So for outline applications that come into the spring application round, so the deadline would be in March or April, then final decisions would come in November of that year. And then for the autumn application round, where deadlines are going to be in October, the final decisions for those would come the following May. The application form is online, and very, very occasionally some applicants lose their applications midway through. So it's always going to be safer for you to prepare a response, prepare your kind of application in a Word document and then paste it into the online form. I'm always amazed that some people don't do that. Anyway, so very, very, very occasionally you can lose your application. The funding amounts that we provide, this was actually on the previous slide, so I'll just scroll back there. So the vast majority of our grants that we award in the main grants programme and then the Racial Diversity UK programme are below 300,000, and that's generally for a 2 or 3 year research project. We do fund projects up to 500,000 in those programmes. That's getting really to the kind of on the large side and the upper end of what we look at. The strategic fund looks for bigger applications. So these are bigger, more ambitious, bolder programmes, projects where we look at £1 to £3 million grants. Very occasionally, we would accept applications that are in the 500,000 to 750,000 pound range. That is really the exception, and we would always encourage anyone that's thinking of applying for anything over 500,000 to get in touch with us even before you start putting in an outline application, to have a discussion with us about whether that really is whether there really is a case that it's so exceptional that you would need to go up to that level of funding. So most of our grants, as I've said, are below 300,000, and those are mostly for projects that run for 2 to 3 years. Just a quick word about success rates. This is hugely competitive, as is all research funding. We are now receiving well over 400 applications in each outline round, even more in the autumn round where the Racial Diversity UK programme sits. It's become a lot more competitive. We know that on the basis of the last application round that we had, about 1 in 10 will make it from outline application and be invited to a full application stage. And then at full application stage, about half of those would eventually be funded. So overall, it's about a 5% success rate. And then just in terms of the information that you can see on our website about current live grants, there's lots of information there about the projects that we're currently funding. We have 220 active grants at the moment with a total value of about £72 million. So what we look for in that assessment process, first of all, we're looking for a good case to fund your research. So you really need to make the case for the importance of your project. We'd be looking at whether it's an interesting question, addressing an important issue that fits our priority questions, and is it relevant to our research interests? Again, these are the interests that Alex has outlined in the earlier part of the presentation. You need to tell us why the research is needed. What are you going to find out from doing it? We're looking for an understanding of the social context for the research and how your research is relevant to that wider social context. If it's appropriate, have you got a theory of change or a hypothesis that you're setting out for testing? So we're really looking for a kind of strong rationale for what you're doing. I think it's important to say that you shouldn't assume that everyone who's looking at your application is already going to know what the case for the importance is. You need to make a compelling case. We're also looking at how clearly you can communicate the case for importance, even at this initial stage, because it's an indicator of how well a funded research study would be able to communicate that to wider audiences. So the second bullet on this slide is about explaining your methodology well. So we're looking at whether your research questions are researchable and the methodology that you're setting out is appropriate and rigorous. The methods need to be robust and they need to be right for the research questions. We're equally receptive and open and interested in funding quantitative and qualitative research, and we're interested in participatory research methods, but anything that you put in terms of methods needs to be appropriate to the research questions and rigorous. You really need to give us an indication of the scale of the research. I mean, how big is your qualitative research sample going to be? We don't know unless you tell us whether you're going to be talking to 5 people or 500 people. And even if you don't know the exact numbers until the research gets underway, we really need to get a sense of the scale of the research you're going to be. You also need to include details of the analytical approach in the application. Lots of people are much better at telling us about the data collection methods and not so good at telling us about the analytical methods. And that includes for when you're doing qualitative methods. We're looking for more information than simply saying we will analyze the data. How are you going to analyze the data? What are the methods that you're going to use there? The next bullet is about identifying key audiences for the research, and pathways to impact. So we really need to see a clear route to how the outputs the research generates are going to positively influence future outcomes. You need to show how this research could have an impact beyond the immediate research participants or the research community, and what's a credible plan to achieve this, including who are the audiences for the research findings and how are you going to engage with them. We want to know what the changes are that you want to see as a result of the project and how you're going to go about achieving this. And in the slide after the next one, I'll talk a bit more about what we mean about influence and impact. We're looking for the skills and experience of your research and engagement team, and to see whether you've got all the skills within the team to deliver everything that you've said you're going to deliver. Obviously, that's going to include research skills, but likely it will include kind of skills for impact and engagement. You might need project management skills, depending on the size of the research study that you're proposing. For research skills, we're not looking for a particular level of seniority. Your principal investigator doesn't need to be a distinguished professor or even an academic. What we're looking for is that the skills and experience in your team are appropriate for the research topic and the methods that you're proposing. It would be really unusual, particularly for bigger projects, that you would only have one person in your team. So usually a project is going to need a range of expertise, including expertise in the research topic, expertise in the methodological approach, possibly, as I've said, expertise in engagement and impact. I want to say and stress that we really do value the role that lived experience contributes to research, and we're very pleased and happy to see this included in your research team where you think that's appropriate. We also have a requirement now that grant holders commit to supporting junior members of their team, and we have an emerging career research network where we are making that contribution as well to skills development and networking for early career emerging career researchers. So we encourage our grant holders to ensure that their ECRs are joining that support network. And then on value for money, we do assess value for money. We're looking at whether the budget you've requested is appropriate and whether it offers good value for money. So is the cost of your project justified by the potential benefits that the research might bring? We're looking at whether the resources are going to be used in the best way to achieve the intended outcomes, and whether the costs are proportionate to the scale of the research activity. We do understand that some research methods are going to be more expensive than others. So, for example, participatory community research will likely cost more, especially, for example, if you're paying people to participate in your research. We don't set any restrictions or limits on the costs for particular types of research. So there's no upper limit for how much you could pay peer researchers if that's an approach that you're adopting. What we want you to do is to use the most appropriate methods for the research questions that you're addressing, and to explain to us why that's the most appropriate method. But we do recognise that some approaches are going to cost more than others. So a couple of things to avoid that are really kind of common things that we see in applications. I mean, I've already talked on the previous slide about what makes a good application. So it's basically doing all the things that I've just spoken about. There are some weaknesses that come up very frequently. So we'd urge you to avoid, firstly, trying to do too much. We often see that your applicants combine too many methods or too many stages into one research project, that they're trying to develop, test or evaluate multiple interventions all at the same time. We frequently see applications where they're just like simply so many research questions, you couldn't possibly answer them all in one research study. Or sometimes you see a good application where there's another, what looks like a different application altogether, kind of like shoehorned in because they're trying to do. So it looks like two studies. So basically, overall, it's just about not trying to do too much in one application. I'd say that's particularly true for kind of smaller applications. Just be careful about not over exceeding and being over ambitious in what you're trying to get into one application. The second thing really to try and avoid, and I did speak about this in the previous slide, is weak pathways to impact, about not being very clear about how your research would lead to real world change. Not showing how your findings would reach policymakers or practitioners, not being very clear about who the audiences are for the research. See a lot of applications that say we will reach policymakers, full stop, end of. But we're looking for a kind of much clearer explanation of what the pathway to impact will be. And then the final thing to avoid, and again, I touched on this in the previous slide, you do need to explain your methods very clearly. Just to add to what I've said about kind of like what we're looking for in terms of clearly explained methods, to add is it really helps if you explain which methods will answer which of your research questions. It makes your proposal much clearer. And if you can show how your questions relate to your case for importance, how your methods address the research questions, how the outputs are going to be generated by the methods, and how those outputs will lead to influence and outcomes. So there's always kind of a coherent thread running through your application. So just a few more things to note about impact and outcomes. So impact and the ability to affect change are really key in the work that we fund, and we want our applicants to be thinking about how their work will be intentional in bringing about change, even at the outline application stage. We think about impact in 5 different ways, and we would expect every application to show their plans to achieve impact in at least one of these areas. There is more about this in our guide for applicants, on our website, but basically it's not just always about policy impact, but changes to policies or systems or legislation is one of the ways in which we think about impact. But we equally, on point 2, are interested in how research and evidence can inform change in practice. We recognise that research can have an important role in advancing understanding and awareness, encouraging new perspectives to help inform policy and practice. We recognise in point 4 that change can be about changing attitudes or perceptions. Evidence can alter the way social problems are thought about. There's a line here that it's important not to cross over, because we're not looking for advocacy projects or campaign projects. So, but we do recognise change in terms of attitudes and perceptions. And then the final one is about opportunities for building capacity and research that would strengthen the research communities in our areas of interest. So for all of these, we'd expect you to identify who the audience for your work will be. We're not necessarily expecting names, but we are expecting specifics. So not just we will engage with policymakers, but more we will share our research findings with this policy network or this department, or just a more specificity that shows us that you've got a clear understanding of what the kind of the pathway is to who you're trying to reach with the research. We do recognise that it's not realistic to expect that every research study is going to have an immediate influence or impact, and this is why we do talk about it in terms of pathways and expecting you to show the pathway to what those changes would be. So I think that's the end of the kind of information that we wanted to share with you. Please do give us feedback, and I think there's something going into the chat that will enable you to go on to the feedback form on our website. This is a pilot webinar, so we haven't done a webinar that's targeted at a specific research group before, so we're really interested in getting your feedback on how we can improve this. And then for a follow-up, we are offering one-to-one chats with our grants team, and the information is on the feedback form. So if you go onto the feedback form and then click through, you'll get the information about how you can sign up with a one-to-one chat. These chats are scheduled next week. They're 15-minute slots for you to ask more questions about our funding application and assessment processes, or for you to explore in more detail any of the information that you've heard in this webinar. Alex and I will be there, plus a whole load more volunteers from our grants team. In terms of how you stay in touch, and we will be sharing these slides with you, so you'll get all this information. It's all on there, the applications at Nuffield, email, our website, LinkedIn, YouTube, and I would urge everyone to sign up for our newsletter, because that's how you're going to get regular updates about our funding. There's another thing that I see. Oh yes, and then we're gonna move on now, because we've finished our kind of presentations. We're going to move on to answer your questions. The Q&A function, you can drop your questions in there. We've got upvoting in there, so you can upvote any questions that go in, and we will take the most popular ones. And then the questions and answers will also come out as a resource to everyone that's signed up to this webinar. So to those of you who are online today, but also to people who are watching this later on, and anyone else who's signed up to find out about how to apply for funding. So I think we're done there, and we just need to pause for a moment and wait for any questions to come in.
So I can see the questions coming in through, although I can see that you can't see the questions.
I can't see the questions coming through.
Okay, so I will start to make our way through them. And I don't think that we've had any upvoted just yet, but the first one I saw that I'll start with, that has been upvoted by one person. So I'm a new postdoctoral researcher. Can early career researchers apply as a principal investigator or a co-investigator? And the answer to that is yes, they can. And the likelihood of success will all depend on what it is you are trying to do, and the scope and scale of the project. The bigger the project, the more you need to make sure that you have got the right structures and systems around you in place in order to be able to sort of deliver that project. You'll be thinking about what it would take for you to be able to deliver that project successfully, and who are the other people you might need to have on your team. Or you might also want to consider, either for a specific project or more generally, who might sort of act in a mentoring role to enable you, particularly if it's your first funded project, to be able to support you to deliver a project successfully. So we'd be looking, sort of at you and the relevance of the topic, but also about the networks that you might have around you in order to be able to deliver a first project successfully. So we've then got right, and there's a related question. So which is about whether or not we fund sort of masters and PhD students. So we might have sort of PhD students doing some of the work, or some of the grants are structured so that they're doing some of the work on some of our projects. We mentioned, that you don't necessarily have to have a doctorate in order to apply for our research. The key point is we don't pay for the master's fees or the PhD fees. So you could apply to us as a doctoral student as part of a project, with a specific sort of idea and focus in mind, but we wouldn't fund your PhD fees or any master's fees. And are all the research grants solely for research focused on the UK? Yes, we are interested in improving social well-being in the UK. Now, sort of comparative and international research might be a key component from that. We are interested in learning from abroad. We're interested in learning, from across the 4 nations of the UK, and even from across sort of different, local areas within the UK. But the key point is that the insights from the research are focused on informing UK, be it national, regional, local, policy and practice.
Okay, I can see the questions on the Q&A now. We've got a question here that asks whether successful applications for the previous Racial Diversity UK grants will be available online, and the answer is yes. That information is on our website. When we send out the Q&A transcript for this webinar, we'll make sure that we include a link in that to where you can find that information, but it is all on our website. Looking for other questions that have been upvoted. Sorry, somebody said they've missed where the feedback form was. Is the feedback form in the chat? I'm just getting technical support that's showing me how to get them upvoted. Can salary costs be included is the next one. So yes, absolutely. You would cover the costs of the salaries for the people that are doing the research. Yes. Yeah. And if you look at the back of our guide for applicants, there are full details there about the costs that can be applied for. But the vast majority of our of any grant funding often tends to be staff costs. I think you've answered the one about international grant applications.
Yes.
Okay, and then the next one is how much PPI involvement, which is a typo, I think you mean principal investigator involvement, are you looking for in terms of application development? I'm not.
So, I mean, I would expect the principal investigator to be the one who is leading the development of the application, who is leading the delivery of the grant if funded. We would also be expecting them to work as part of a team. particularly if there are co-investigators on the project, be looking for to see their involvement too. And many of our grants, involve people who are devoting a part of their working week. So 0.2, 0.5, 0.1 of their time to a project. So often people will be combining sort of these research projects with teaching responsibilities or with other research projects that they are working upon. But the principal investigator would be, our key point of contact throughout the application process.
Okay, the next question here is, what is Nuffield's position on grants considerably below 300,000, for instance, 20,000 grants? So I think we are interested.
Yes,
absolutely. I would definitely suggest that you send something in to our applications@nuffieldfoundation.org email address, if that's the kind of ballpark you're thinking of, and just, you could run that past us before you put in an outline application. But yeah, definitely, I think 20,000. I think we say our lower limit's 15,000.
yes.
The next question is, how does Nuffield view co-creation or co-production methodologies where the research design and methods are determined through the co-creation process itself, rather than being predefined by the academic team at the point of application? Do you want to start with this one? This is quite a tricky one.
Okay, so yes, and I was just looking through the list of questions, so didn't spot this one come up.
Co-creation or co-production methodologies, so where the actual methodology is going to be designed, so you can't at the application stage say
exactly how it will play out. We would expect to see a sensible plan in place for delivering that co-production, and so how you would go about the co-production itself.
Yes. I think it would also be worth, in your case for importance, reminding us what the importance, why you'd be taking that co-production approach, and not just assuming it's so obvious that co-production is the right way to do this. Just explaining why it's the best way to approach the research questions that you're asking. The next question, can you resubmit an unsuccessful idea after improving it? We get quite clear feedback actually about whether or not you can do that.
Yes. Often we will say, that the application sort of, didn't meet our relevance criteria, didn't meet our methodology thresholds. And sometimes we will send people feedback that says, yes, we really liked this, but. So if you receive one of those letters from us, we really liked this application, but it didn't quite sort of hit the mark on X, Y, and Z, but we'd be happy for you to redevelop it and resubmit it, then we would love to see it again. And unfortunately, if you didn't get that feedback the first time, then it would be unlikely that we would want to fund a sort of variant or further development of that proposal. Although I accept that is a bit of a grey line when you talk about improving a project. It depends sort of quite how dramatically. If you think the project is actually fundamentally different to an application that you originally submitted to us, then you could try it again.
Okay. The next question is, can solo founders from a community interest company apply for a grant? So yes. If we're looking, you have to be a constituted UK based organisation. So yes, you would be eligible. Do check on our eligibility checker, but yes is the answer. I think we've already answered the question about if you can apply if you were unsuccessful in the first round. The next question is, as we need to be associated with an institution, if we are currently independent, how can we approach institutions with the idea in order to gain permission to include them in the application? Is this a normal pathway to institutional association? do you want to have a go at that one, Alice?
I'm going to read that one over your shoulder as well.
Okay, so somebody who's a researcher, independent, not affiliated to an organisation or an institution,
Yes.
and they think, how would they go about approaching an institution with their research idea? Is that a normal thing for researchers to do in order to get that kind of institutional affiliation?
Yeah, so we have occasionally had researchers that set up their own research consultancy and sort of apply for funding through that route. Or another pathway might be to approach a research institute in order to do that. But that sounds sort of like a potentially quite a complicated pathway. But I mean, if you wanted to reach out with a more specific question about your circumstances, then please do send it to our applications inbox. And I should say, all of these questions that are popping up today, we will respond to all of them, even though we won't get round to answering every single one of them during this webinar. So that is some content we will be sending back your way.
Yes. And also, when we send that out, we can add anything that we didn't think of saying in the moment. So you will get fuller answers in the questions and answer information that we send out afterwards. Do you fund research conferences? Okay, so within those grants programs that I've outlined, there isn't a program that of itself would just fund a research conference. There might be a research conference might be part of your proposal in terms of how you're going to kind of reach audiences and have impact. So we would fund the costs of that if it's an integral part of a project. Separately, and as part of our kind of equality, diversity and inclusion commitments and action plan, we did sponsor the Society of Black Academics conference last year, and we'll be having a conversation with them about working together in the future, and that might include further sponsorship. But we haven't got a specific kind of program that is exclusively about research conference sponsorship or funding. So the next question, okay, this looks quite complicated. So you're saying, on the one hand, to be realistic, but you talk quite a lot about engaging with policy. So does that mean that unless your impact can show policy change, does that mean that it will not be funded? So no, the answer is no, it doesn't mean. I think I hope that on the slide that we shared with you about how we think about impact, that we're not just talking about policy impact. In some of the examples that I gave, I might have said policy more often than I said practice.
We mean both.
But we do mean both. So when you have a chance to go back and look at the slides and look at the guide for applicants, you will see that we're taking a much broader view of impact, and we don't just mean policy change. We recognise that that change can happen in multiple different ways, and your research project might not be leading to policy impact at all, and it might be much more in the practitioner space.
But what we would look for is within a project, either being able to draw on existing networks in order to reach those policymakers or those practitioners that ultimately need to sort of know about the research, be involved in it as it goes along, and to hear the results at the end. So we'd be looking for you to demonstrate those networks, or the ways in which you would be building the networks as the project goes along. So I think the real piece is to demonstrate that engagement throughout the project with the people that are, would be key stakeholders, key recipients of the research, and engaging them throughout the project. So we are not expecting sort of immediate change to practice and policy as a result of your research projects, but we're expecting that interface with that world as the project is going along and being done.
Thank you. So the next question, I applied for the October funding round, and prior to submitting it through my institution's peer review process, I emailed the proposal to confirm that it aligned with the current priorities. Unfortunately, the application was not shortlisted. What struck me most, however, was the absence of any feedback or explanation for the decision. Providing feedback would have been extremely helpful for reflection, learning, and future development. Yes, absolutely. We agree. It would be, and this is a real. It's a dilemma. It's a real issue for us. We would love to be able to provide more feedback, and we recognise how helpful that would be. And we do try to provide as much tailored feedback as we can to as many applicants as we can. But the volume of applications that we receive is just huge. And providing tailored feedback is very time consuming, and it's just not possible for us to do that to the degree that we would really like to. I mean, we're all professional researchers, and we absolutely understand and recognise how important and helpful that could be. And it's it really grieves us that we don't have more resource that we can put into that. We are open. I don't want to open the floodgates, but do kind of contact us and ask specifically if for feedback, and we will try our best to get more detailed feedback to you. It might take a little while to do that, but we do try our best to do that. But routinely, for all the applications that we're not able to take forward, we just don't have the capacity to be able to give all the feedback that we'd like to. We might have time for one more.
Okay.
We might have time for two, actually, because this one's quite straightforward. Can I apply as an individual attached to a university, or do I need to apply as a group? I think the lead applicant needs to be an institution. It needs to be
attached to an institution.
Or attached to an institution. But if you're an individual attached to a university, the university will need to be the legal body for the application.
Yes. So, I might sort of expand on this. My interpretation of that question is: can you, as an individual attached to a university, apply for a grant? Yes. And then the scope and scale of that grant ought to determine how many people are needed in the research team in order to be able to deliver on the project.
Okay. I think where I was trying to go as well is say, yes, as an individual attached to a university, you can apply for a grant, but the university would need to be on board with it. You can't do it without them.
Because they would be the institutional signatory.
That's right. And then, let's just take this one last one that looks, I aim to submit my thesis in December. Can I apply as the principal investigator in the October round?
Yes.
Okay. Fantastic. There are more questions in there, but I don't think we've got any more time now. So we will take all the questions, provide written responses, and share that information with you. It will be coming out to you. I think I'm right in saying that the feedback link has gone into the chat. So do click on that, give us your feedback, and then that's the route to signing up for the one-to-one chats with our grants team. Thank you.
Thank you very much.